Close your eyes for a moment and imagine waking in a stone-walled room before the sun has even begun to rise. The air is cold enough to sting your lungs, and the only sound is your own breathing, echoing softly against the rough, gray walls. You're lying on a narrow wooden bed, covered in a thin wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke from last night's fire. Outside your door, a heavy silence sits over the monastery like a second skin, the kind of silence that feels alive. Dawn is still a rumor on the horizon, and yet you're already awake, because this is how life begins for those who devote themselves to a path most people will never understand. For medieval monks and nuns, privacy didn't exist the way it does today. Instead, there was something deeper, a strange mix of solitude and watchfulness, rules and secrets, devotion and human longing. A world where the soul was always being tested, and the heart was always trying to stay quiet. You swing your feet over the edge of the bed and touch the cold stone floor. For a moment, a tiny, rebellious thought slips through your mind, one you push away instantly. The thought of the life you left behind, the village sounds, the warmth of family, the image of a face you once cared for. Feelings aren't supposed to follow you here, yet somehow they do. They always do. Even inside cloisters, the human heart refuses to obey. You walk down a dark corridor, lit only by a flickering torch. Shadows cling to the walls, bending around your shape as if they're watching you. This is how you move through life here, under watchful eyes, both real and imagined. You're expected to be calm, obedient, silent. You're expected to bury every emotion beneath a layer of discipline. But emotions aren't stones. They shift, they breathe, they remember. At the end of the hallway, the door to the chapel stands open. A few silhouettes move like ghosts inside, robed figures whispering prayers that have been repeated for centuries. You join them, feeling your breath slow, your mind settle into the rhythm of words spoken in a language very few people even understand. This is the first rule of life here. Do not question, just surrender. But surrendering isn't as easy as it sounds. As the sun finally touches the edge of the horizon, you sit beside others who share this life, men or women who once had their own stories, their own forbidden memories. Some came here willingly to escape heartbreak. Others were sent against their will to satisfy family power games, and some simply didn't fit anywhere else. Every day follows the same pattern: prayer, silence, work, more silence, small meals, more prayer, hour after hour after hour. The predictability is supposed to erase desire, but instead it has the opposite effect. The mind, deprived of stimulation, begins wandering down paths it shouldn't. Emotions become sharper, memories become louder. A glance that lasts a second too long becomes dangerous. Inside these walls, monks and nuns lived closer together than outsiders ever realized. They washed in shared rooms, slept in shared dormitories, worked side by side, and prayed shoulder to shoulder. There were rules, endless rules, telling them where they could walk, how they could speak, what they could feel. But rules have never stopped human hearts. Not in the Dark Ages, not now, not ever. And sometimes the rules were broken quietly, late at night, when the halls were empty and the moon poured pale light across the cloister floor. Footsteps would echo softly, a monk moving toward the gardens, pretending he couldn't sleep, a nun returning from the kitchen, claiming she needed water. Their paths might cross, their eyes might meet, and for a moment too brief to measure, something forbidden would flicker between them, a pulse, a spark, a reminder that they were still human beneath the robes. But desire wasn't always romantic. Sometimes it was the desire to escape. Sometimes it was the desire to feel free. Sometimes it was the desire to simply speak honestly without fear of punishment. Inside monasteries and convents, privacy was a rare luxury, but secrecy was everywhere. Imagine sitting in the refectory during meals, where no one is allowed to talk. The only sound is the clatter of wooden spoons. Yet beneath the silence, dozens of hidden stories, swirl crushes, resentments, whispered betrayals, silent alliances, unspoken confessions. You can feel it in the air. Humans packed tightly together, pretending they're not thinking the very things they're forbidden to think. Even confessors, monks, tasked with listening to sins, carried heavy secrets. They heard everything. Forbidden encounters, secret doubts, glimpses shared in the gardens at night. And they were forbidden from revealing a single word. Imagine how much weight those souls carried. Inside these ancient walls, devotion was real, but temptation was real too. And the most dangerous temptations weren't always physical. Sometimes they were ideas, questions, doubts about the rules they lived under, thoughts that could get someone punished, or transferred, or worse, declared unfit for religious life. And while outsiders imagined monks and nuns as cut off from the world, the truth was much more complicated. Merchants visited, travelers stayed overnight, pilgrims wandered through, and sometimes glimpses of ordinary life slipped inside, a flirtatious smile, a familiar voice, a reminder of what it felt like to be truly alive. These moments didn't break the rules, but they broke something inside the people who lived here. You sit again in the chapel. The candles burn low. The air smells of incense and damp stone. You're surrounded by people who have dedicated their entire lives to silence, discipline, and sacrifice. Yet somehow, the space feels full of things no one is allowed to say. Hidden desires, quiet rebellions, secret loneliness, silent longing. And as night falls across the monastery once again, you realize the truth hidden beneath centuries of stone and silence. Even in a world built on devotion, the human heart writes its own rules. The candles in the chapel flicker as a draft slips through the cracks in the stone walls. And for a moment you watch the tiny flames bend, as if bowing to some unseen presence. The others around you don't move, their faces calm and unreadable in the dim light. Yet you know you can feel it, that behind those steady expressions lie hearts that wrestle with the same thoughts as yours. Doubt, memory, desire, fear. The tension between wanting to be holy and simply wanting to be human. You step out into the cloister, where the moonlight spills across the courtyard in long silver lines. The air is cold enough that every breath forms a ghostly cloud in front of you. Your footsteps echo softly on the worn stone pathway, and somewhere behind you, you hear another pair of footsteps. Soft, careful, intentional. You don't look back, because you've learned not to. Here, curiosity can be dangerous. Here, noticing something means being responsible for a secret you never asked to hold. As you walk, you pass the herb garden, neat rows of lavender, rosemary, sage, and mint. By day, it smells clean and comforting. But at night, the fragrance mixes with the damp air, creating something heavier, almost intoxicating. This garden is where many quiet conversations have taken place. A few whispered too close. A few glances held too long. The place where obedience sometimes cracked under the pressure of silence. There was a nun, many years before you arrived, whose story is still whispered among the elders. She would come here late at night to tend the plants, claiming she couldn't sleep. But her footsteps always coincided with those of a monk from the nearby monastery. They rarely spoke. Speaking wasn't necessary. Their hands would brush as they reached for the same sprig of thyme or knelt beside the same row of lavender. It was harmless, the elders said, innocent enough. But innocence was a fragile thing in this world. One misinterpreted glance, one jealous pair of eyes watching from the shadows, and the story turned darker. Both were moved to separate houses, far from each other, far from the garden, far from the only connection they had allowed themselves to feel. No confession was taken. No evidence was needed. The suspicion alone was enough. You think about that as you walk, listening to the night. This cloister is peaceful, yes, but it is a peace built carefully, precariously, on top of the human instinct to reach for one another. And all around you are people who try, every day, to push that instinct deeper and deeper into the shadows. Inside the dormitory, the space is dimly lit by only a few lanterns. Rows of beds line the walls, each one separated by thin wooden partitions that barely reach your shoulders. It's privacy without being private, solitude without being alone. You can hear the breathing of those around you, the rustle of blankets, the occasional soft cough. Even in sleep, everyone shares the same air, the same rhythm, the same unspoken understanding that no one is ever truly unseen. You lie down on your narrow bed, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling. The silence is heavy, like a thick blanket draped over your chest. And as your eyes adjust to the dark, you notice something. A faint shape moving 2 beds away, slow, careful, almost invisible. Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's someone who can't sleep. Perhaps it's someone heading toward the small alcove at the end of the hallway where a lone candle always burns, left for those who struggle in the night. Perhaps it's just a shadow playing tricks. But in monasteries and convents, shadows have stories. There were records, old ones, tucked away in the library behind heavy chains, describing monks who would sneak into the capscriptorium after dark to copy forbidden writings. Books the church disapproved of, poems about love, tales of longing. Even medical texts that explained things no one here was supposed to understand. And then there were the nuns who wrote letters they never sent, letters to families, to lost loves, to the versions of themselves that existed before vows were spoken. Letters hidden beneath floorboards, behind loose stones, under straw mattresses. The church demanded the body be obedient, but the mind had its own corridors, darker and harder to patrol. You shift on your bed, listening to the small sounds of the night, the drip of water somewhere far down the hall, the soft hum of distant chanting from a monk who wakes early to pray alone, the hoot of an owl outside the window, and underneath it all, the quiet beat of your own heart, reminding you that no matter how much discipline you practice, no matter how many rules you follow, you are still made of pulse and breath and memory. In the morning, you help with chores, sweeping, tending to the kitchen, carrying buckets of water from the well. Work is supposed to quiet the mind, but often it does the opposite. It gives you too much time to think, too much time to notice the moments in which others try not to be noticed. A young monk, barely past adolescence, lingers, when he passes by the visiting pilgrims. He tries to hide it, lowering his gaze, walking quickly. But the human instinct to see and be seen is strong, stronger than the vows he barely understands. A senior nun presses her lips together whenever the bishop visits, her jaw tight, her eyes unreadable. You've wondered whether she's hiding anger, fear, or something else entirely. Everyone here has a past, a life before the robes, a story that didn't stop existing simply because they stepped inside sacred walls. You take a break near the window that faces the orchard. Sunlight touches the branches of the apple trees, turning them gold. A few monks are out there now, gathering fallen fruit, their robes brushing the grass with soft, rhythmic swishes. And as you watch them, you notice the way they move around each other, not carelessly, but cautiously, respectfully, carefully balancing obedience with silent, unspoken, personal boundaries. Those boundaries are invisible, yet powerful. Everyone here feels them. Everyone knows when someone is standing a little too close, speaking a little too softly, offering a glance that lingers a fraction of a second too long. Human closeness is a strange thing. Even when forbidden, even when controlled, it finds a way to exist in small, nearly invisible forms. A hand brushing yours when passing a bowl at dinner. A shared smile during a moment of unexpected humor. A quiet exchange of comfort after a difficult confession. These moments are not allowed, but they happen. Because humans are not stone, no matter how ancient the walls are. As night falls again, you walk back to the cloister, the moon rising high and silent. The shadows stretch across the courtyard like long fingers reaching for the edges of your robe. And you feel something familiar settling into your chest, that quiet understanding that tomorrow will look just like today, but you will not be the same. Because inside these walls, change happens quietly, softly, secretly. And the deepest secrets are always the ones hidden within the private lives of those who chose or were forced to live behind monastery walls. The bell tolls in the distance, a low, steady sound that rolls through the monastery walls like a slow wave. You pause mid-step, letting the echo drift over you. This bell means something different than the others. It's not the call to prayer. It's not the signal for mealtime. It's the bell that marks the evening silence, the rule that turns every voice into a whisper and every thought into a confession that no one will hear but you. You walk toward the refectory, where dinner has already been laid out. A long wooden table stretches the length of the room, lit only by a few candles at the center. Their soft glow paints everyone's faces in warm gold, smoothing the strain that daylight never hides. No words are spoken. Spoons scrape gently against wooden bowls. Bread is passed hand to hand. A monk at the far end reads scripture aloud, his voice soft, steady, unbroken, the same readings every night, chosen not to inspire passion, but to tame it. Yet even in this silence, your senses pick up things that break the monotony. The way someone exhales too slowly, the faint tremble in another's hands, the stare of a nun across the aisle who keeps her eyes lowered, not because she's humble, but because she doesn't trust what might show if she looks up. Rules are meant to control, but they also reveal. When dinner ends, you place your bowl on the stack and step outside into the dark corridor. The torches mounted on the walls crackle softly, leaving patches of shadow between their pools of light. You've learned that this corridor changes at night. People move differently when they retired, honest and unguarded. You notice a figure ahead of you pause near a doorway, glancing around before slipping inside. It's nothing dramatic, nothing forbidden, just a choice made quietly. A choice meant not to be witnessed. Inside the scriptorium, the air smells of ink and old parchment. Several monks sit hunched over their desks, their quills whispering across pages. This is where secrets often hide, in the margins of manuscripts, in erased lines, in symbols whose meanings only their writers understood. One monk, you've been told, used to write small notes between the lines of sacred texts, tiny warnings, doubts, longings, a single sentence written so faintly that no one noticed for years. God sees my heart, but I wish someone else could. You run your fingers along the spines of the books on the shelf, heavy volumes bound in leather. Many were copied by hand, right where you're standing. Some contain prayers, others contain rules, and a few contain quiet rebellions, disguised as scholarship. You sit at a table, dipping your quill into ink. The words don't come easily, they never do at night. Thoughts feel louder when written during hours of silence. You're not sure whether you're recording history, describing your day, or simply trying to hold on to a part of yourself that the vows demand you abandon. A nun enters quietly and sits across the room. She doesn't look at you. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone is enough to stir something, not disobedience, not desire, but understanding. The kind that comes from living the same life of restriction, hearing the same bells, repeating the same prayers, fighting the same silent battles. She pulls a small scrap of parchment from her sleeve and begins to write, fast, urgent. You glance only once, long enough to see the words, "Forgive me," at the top of the page. You look away before you see more. In this world, privacy is rare, and what little exists is sacred. When she leaves, the parchment remains on the desk. You could reach for it, you could unfold it, you could satisfy the curiosity that scratches quietly at your thoughts, but you don't. Some things, even in a place full of rules, must be left untouched. You remain in the scriptorium until the candles burn low, then walk out into the night air again. The courtyard is still, the sky above is a deep, endless blue, dotted with stars that seem almost close enough to touch. You feel small beneath them, but not in a frightening way, more like someone standing at the edge of a vast mystery. Footsteps approach from behind. You don't turn immediately. There is a certain rhythm to these steps, soft and slow, like someone walking simply to walk, not heading anywhere with urgency. A monk passes you, his hood drawn low. He nods once, a gesture that could mean greeting, solidarity, or nothing at all. Here, even the smallest motion carries weight. You return to the dormitory, where most are already asleep. The dim lantern light shows peaceful faces, but you know peace is not the whole story. Some dream vividly, some clutch their blankets too tightly, some stare at the ceiling for hours before sleep claims them. The quiet is full of hidden battles. As you settle into your bed, you think of the stories older monks have told. Stories of confessions that lasted hours. Stories of nuns moved to different convents after forming too close a friendship. Stories of monks who left entirely unable to silence their hearts. Stories of others who stayed for decades, finding unexpected comfort, not in holiness, but in the routine, the silence, the familiarity of this strange and structured life. The candle flickers one last time before going out, leaving the room in darkness. And in that darkness, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. monks and nuns are not holy beings carved from stone. They are human. People who entered these walls with memories, fears, hopes, and wounds. People trying to bury their past while secretly carrying it with them. People who crave connection even as they condemn themselves for wanting it. This place, this quiet, disciplined, sacred place, is not a world without desire. It is a world built to hold desire captive, to tame it, to suffocate it, until it becomes something else entirely. But desire does not die easily. It softens, reshapes, hides beneath obedience, transforms into subtle glances, stolen moments, whispered prayers, trembling hands, and sleepless nights. And as the winter wind presses against the shutters, as the silence of the dormitory deepens, you understand something that the rules never say out loud. The private lives of medieval monks and nuns were never truly silent, never truly simple, never truly pure. They were complicated, human, messy, filled with the weight of promises, the pull of instinct, and the quiet ache of everything they were told to surrender. And tomorrow, when the bell rings again and the day begins, everyone will rise from their beds, put on their robes, and step once more into lives meant to look holy, but shaped deeply and quietly by the very humanity they were trying to escape.